Hello, everyone. I am back here, joined by a new face. Well, not new face, really, but, my good friend, Tyson Hughes. Tyson, how you doing? You ready to get into some Pokemon?
Of course, I'm ready to get into some Pokemon, Joe. I've been watching the first two games that we had here on the World Cup stream so far, and they were some pretty good games. Lots of unique teams that we've gotten to see today. A little bit different than Lille, even though a Rabombi just won that regional. So tons of cool Pokemon that we're going to get to see here today. I'm super excited to get into the matches with you, Joe, as we jump into our round 3 here.
It's always the weird bug Pokemon winning all these regionals now, right? First it's Scyther, then it's Rabombi. I wonder what's next. Maybe Heracross, one of the other ones. Who knows?
I actually didn't even think of that. Yeah, you're right. The Scyther into the Rabombi. There's tons of different bug Pokemon maybe out there to explore. I know a Selgor was good back in the day. Maybe if he comes back in the next Pokemon game, he could see some light again. But no, I think it's really cool with the World Cup that you get to see a lot of these cool teams, while as in tournaments and regionals and things like that, you might want more of a consistent team. For example, that Lele Briganti team with those like Ninetales and Ursaluna Blood Moon and those kind of consistent pieces in Incineroar and Rillaboom. But because of that in World Cup, you kind of know what your opponent maybe wants to play in a tournament in Swiss rounds and things like that. So you have a lot more flexibility to bring things like the Dondozo with like the Stealth Rocks Annihilate that we saw in round 1, or even something like the Drifloom in round 2, even if it didn't work out. And this isn't as interesting as either of those bug Pokemon, but we're going to jump into our team preview here of Juan Gonzalez's team, using a very familiar Rain team with maybe a couple things swapped out. Sinistcha being the thing that catches my eye first over something like that Amoonguss, with running a Shadow Ball. You also have lots of other heavy hitters on this team as well to really support the Rain, is Baskia Legion, and of course that Archaludon paired with that Electroshot and the Pelipper to set the Rain to make sure both of those are doing as much damage as possible.
Yeah, I think a couple interesting differences. You kind of threw a mention to it, the Shadow Ball on the Sinistcha, as well too some interesting Terra choices here. So for example, Bug on Incineroar is not the most common. Obviously it's safety goggles, so that does make a bit of sense. Terra Bug on Archaludon, although it used to be more common before, a lot of them have leaned into Terra Fighting, so you could get a stronger body press, especially on a set like this where you are running Snarl, right? Usually you want to have that power output from that body press, but opting to go for that Terra Bug for a more defensive, obviously choice. And then also on this Pelipper, running the Terra Ghost instead of Terra Stellar, so cutting back on its damage a little bit just so it can obviously be immune to Fake Out is a pretty nice quality of it. I think too also the fact that it has Tailwind is a little bit unique as well. And then we got Team Flare on the other side, going along with the Pokemon Legends EA release. I guess we got a Team Flare playing for South Korea.
Yeah, and Junhyeok Yang here is going to be using a bit more of a familiar team in the Incineroar, Rillaboom, Sneasler, Volcarona, Ninetales, and Ursaluna Blood Moon. A lot of these sets might look familiar to the trainers that have been watching the IRL circuit. The only real difference here is that we see the Volcarona with a Covert Cloak and Quiver Dance there, kind of giving the team another mode of setup instead of the Golden Go, which we normally see in that slot. Having access to a real fire type damage, considering they removed Flare Blitz in place of Taunt on the Incineroar, just want to point that out, is actually super cool, I think. And with something like Terra Dragon, and if you remember the team sheet from before, something like the Archaludon doesn't have a Dragon move to take advantage of the fact that Volcarona is a Dragon type. So I think that's going to be super interesting. And with other tools on the team, like Swords Dance on the Sneasler, as well as the Grassy Seed, and Encores of the Ninetale, I think Junhyeok Yang has a really good team here, especially with Yawn. I mean, we've seen this team play out a million times, though.
I mean, Terra Dragon is definitely unique here for the Terra Blast, especially because in front of Dragonite, that means you could potentially be taking, obviously, super effective damage from Scale Shots instead of Terra Fairy, which is immune. But we are going to see Junhyeok just going for a very, very safe Sneasler and Rillaboom lead. However, it's not necessarily the best here, especially with the Intimidate coming out into both the Rillaboom and the Sneasler, right? With the Intimidate getting down on both of those Pokemon, it's going to mean that Sneasler is going to need to set up probably 2 Swords Dances to actually be in an advantage position doing more damage, especially with this -1. You set up Swords Dance once, Incineroar's probably already cycled out, it's coming back in, it's intimidating you again, right? But Sinistcha probably prioritizing this Trick Room approach here and potential Parting Shot to go bring in this Ursaluna in the back here. You could also try to go for a manual switch here. That does run the risk of you getting called out though with a Woodhammer or a close combat.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the ghost typing there on Signature is absolutely great here. So it can't be faked out by that Rillaboom. And even if worst case, when you Trick Room does go up, it might look like both these Pokemon resist as the fake out from Rillaboom goes into the Incineroar, faking it out, choosing to make sure the Incineroar can't get off a taunt or a Flare Blitz or anything like that, as a Sneasler, as you alluded to before, goes for the Swords Dance to try to get some damage later onto the Sinistcha if it gets the chance. But Sinistcha going for that Trick Room to change the speeds around and make sure Juan's Pokemon gets to move first. The Sneasler having the Unburden proc from the Grassy Seed and Rillaboom being naturally faster than the Incineroar, you are in a prime position now to start throwing off attacks. The difference though is Juan's Incineroar actually has Flare Blitz on it, unlike Junhyeok, so this Flare Blitz into that Rillaboom slot is going to be doing a lot of damage. And even though both these Pokemon resist Matcha Gotcha here from Juan, the secondary effect of Matcha Gotcha being able to burn either Pokemon and both of them being physical attackers is definitely a great position that Juan wants to see themselves in.
I mean, I think an interesting part of this position as well is there's like a bit of a mind game in the Ursaluna or not, but we are going to see Matcha Gotcha is avoided on both Pokemon. Pretty unlucky there, to be honest, but the Flare Blitz coming out here, I do like playing it a bit aggressive. If the Matcha Gotcha had connected though, it would have gotten that knockout on the Rillaboom, which would have been very significant here. But Rillaboom being able to throw that Woodhammer back, trying to call out that Ursaluna, switching in. I'm curious to see whether or not it's an acrobatics or a close combat going into that signature slot, trying to catch the Ursaluna coming in. I guess we will see, but close combat just going into this Incineroar, picking it off. Not the worst, but you're also allowing for a free switch, right? So it's a bit of a trade-off.
Yeah, I was a little scared there. I was thinking if another Swords Dance came out or an Acrobatics to try to kind of set yourself up to maybe play around when Ursaluna can come in, knowing it has to maybe go for a Trostalization or a turn to get that Flame Orb to maybe knock out if you use your Trostalization on your Sneasler. If you do go for because you have the Grassy Seed, you actually might be able to eat a Facade as long as you Trostalize to avoid the super effective ground move. You could have played around that, but getting rid of the Incineroar allows Juan to bring in the Ursaluna for free. Junhyeok does have another Pokemon they can bring in here, but under Trick Room, this is going to be very, very difficult to come back from. I think Juan has positioned themselves greatly. And also another thing is the Grassy Train is going to be boosting up those Matcha Gotchas as well. So that little bit of damage is going to be healing up the Sinistcha for any damage that it takes from either the Ninetales or the Sneasler here.
Yeah, I think a big thing too is now, especially if you have Incineroar in the back, right? That's definitely something that could be potentially useful here. But with Incineroar not coming out, it is maybe making me think that there might not be that Incineroar in the back, and maybe something like the Ursaluna to try and cover for the rain mode a bit better. The nice thing here is that you can potentially just bring in the Pelipper to take away the weather control, go for that Terra Ghost, get some good damage down, and really the worst that can happen is maybe a Blizzard comes out, right, hits the Ursaluna, and maybe an Acrobatics goes into the Ursaluna. But at the very least, you're going to be able to leverage this Ursaluna this turn. It's not burned, so it won't be doing as much damage, but it can still put on some good pressure here. But we are going to see Patrick's Pelipper come in from the distribution as well, so kind of fancy Pelipper as well.
It's going to come in, though, and set up the rain as we see a Terastallization here from the Ursaluna into that Ghost type to avoid any super effective damage from that Sneasler's close combat, as well as any super effective damage that the Ninetales might want to throw out with a potential Blizzard. That's another benefit of bringing in Pelipper here, is that's going to remove that snow and make those Blizzards not 100% accurate. As a Terastallization, though, on the Sneasler comes out with that Terra Flying to boost up those Acrobatics more. Now, if Junhyeok plays around the Terra Ghost and goes for an Acrobatics into this Ursaluna, this could be a lot of damage, and in combination with a Facade or in combination with a Blizzard could be a lot of damage. But the Ursaluna tanks that very nicely, and Acrobatics here firing off into the Pelipper though, and not the Ursaluna.
I think the double connect there is like really tough too, right? Because even though it cuts down on accuracy, I mean, Blizzard is still more likely to land than not on Pokemon, right? So being able to connect both there, getting Chip into that Pelipper, breaking its sash, so then now Acrobatics can get the knockout, it does really mean that there's a lot of pressure on this Ursaluna to maximize the value of its turns. Not to mention, if this Ninetales does opt to switch out and come back in, it will have weather control for the remainder of the game. It is worth noting this Ninetales doesn't have access to Auroraville, so you wouldn't necessarily use it to cut down on damage. That being said, this Facade on the board is still putting on a ton of pressure. You have a Matcha Gotcha that's going to be doing a bunch of damage in terrain, so I think there is a lot of pressure on Junhyeok to get the switch correct here and not allow too much damage to come out onto his board.
Yeah, and I think a Sneasler being at full HP here is pretty posed to be able to do a lot of damage to either target here. It's just a matter of which one. And of course, as you mentioned before, what Pokemon is in the back for Junhyeok? If that's the Incineroar, that can be, you know, playable. You can bring it in here for the Ninetales, reset that weather, as well as get an Intimidate down on the Ursaluna might help you live an attack. As we see the Ninetales switch out, this is the kind of key moment in this match. What is the Pokemon of choice for Junhyeok? It is the Volcarona. Protect Vote from the Sneasler. This isn't the worst thing still. You're still bringing out the Ninetales to reset the weather. It is going to have to eat a Shadow Ball, though. Does a small bit of damage. Facade doesn't double the Volcarona, though, so it does get to live the rest of this turn.
I feel like if this had been Facade into the other slot instead of the Sneasler, right, it could have obviously just completely swung the game in Juan Gonzalez's favor. But I think the main problem is now the Sneasler obviously can switch, right? You can maybe sack off the Ninetales for the Sneasler, get the Sneasler back in, or just even let the Sneasler go down to that Facade, right? Maybe get some damage off, get in Ninetales, Heat Wave, Blizzard again, you're in a pretty okay spot, right? The main thing here is going to be how much damage is the Sinistcha actually going to end up taking, right? Not to mention the Volcarona too, if it goes for a Quiver Dance, could be doing even more damage, you know, going into next turn if you know that, like, either way, you're going to have a slot that's able to do something. I think the important thing here from Juan's side is you want to try and get that confirmed knockout on Junhyeok's side on the Sneasler slot, right? And then go from there. But we are going to see the Sneasler opt to switch out here, basically saying, okay, I know the Sneasler is going to get targeted. I'm okay with letting Ninetales go down because it's the most passive out of all the Mons, and maybe taking the opportunity to maybe Quiver Dance with the Volcarona, but if it protects, it could kind of cut down on what it can do next turn.
Yeah, and I really like this approach Junhyeok is taking to getting out of this Trick Room as it wraps up here. Shadow Ball is going to allow Ninetales to hang on, but we know that Juan doubled that slot, so it is going to be a knockout. Imagine it did live through that turn, though, and Junhyeok's Ninetales is able to stay through. Imagine Trick Room is removed, and then you have a Ninetales and a Volcarona on the field. That would be pretty dangerous, but the Ursaluna there and the Sinistcha are at full HP still as the Twisted Dimensions return to normal there. The Grassy Terrain is also gone, so no more healing for any of these Pokemon. The Sneasler is going to come back in and lose its boost as well as Unburden, but we know because of how these Pokemon are built that Junhyeok Sneasler is going to be the fastest thing on the field still. And something like a Heat Wave as well as Acrobatics is very threatening for the Sinistcha. You do have to be very careful with this Ursaluna, though.
I mean, this is still like a little bit tricky. Like Acrobatics, obviously. Oh, it does get the clean knockout here, which is a little bit surprising considering, like, obviously it's pretty strong, but Sinistcha is pretty bulky. I was gonna say, I feel like on the turn where Junhyeok decided to go for a, you know, protect, maybe getting that Quiver Dance up could have been good as well, because then you would have been able to get a little bit more damage off into the Ursaluna to kind of guarantee the game in your favor. What would be scary here is if the Ursaluna is potentially able to survive the Acrobatics from this range, you will be able to protect stall one more turn of Burn Chip, right, from that slot. But after, what's going to happen, right, is the Acrobatics going to get the KO. Ursaluna is pretty physically defensive, so we're going to see whether or not that protect play on Volcarona was correct, or whether or not the Quiver Dance might have been better.
Yeah, I was going to say Juan, I think, pretty much has this game, but because the Sinistcha went down to the Acrobatics and the Volcarona got that single target Heat Wave off into the Ursaluna, it did a little bit more than I was expecting. So we're going to have to see if this Acrobatics gets the knockout, and it does! And Juan actually loses this game one, and Junhyeok is able to take it.
Yeah, so Junhyeok obviously getting rewarded for going with the safer route there of going for the protect on the Volcarona. I was a little bit concerned seeing it at first because I'm like, okay, yes, you can protect, right? And maybe that plays like the less committal one where you're saying like, okay, I'm not going to just try and hard read like where the targeting goes. I'm just going to sack Ninetales, which is pretty safe, right? Go for that protect on Volk. And luckily there it pays off. The Acrobatics getting the knockout, I was very surprised about. I think the big difference maker there was if Sinistcha survives and it's not single target Heat Wave, Ursaluna probably does win that endgame, right? But because the Acrobatics was able to get the knockout on the Sinistcha, it meant the single target Heat Wave went into that Ursaluna, put it just in perfect range where after one protect, you're going to be able to get the knockout with the Acrobatics.
Yeah, and I think that was greatly played from both players there. I really was surprised about that Sinistra because I think both players were playing around that fact, which is why we saw a Swords Dance turn one, right? That turn one could have looked a lot different, right? You have Fake Out and Acrobatics into the Sinistra, and that's a completely different turn. You force a Tristellization on a Juan, maybe. So having that revealed late in the game was great info for next game. But now with that in mind, I'm really interested in how Juan is going to change his game plan, maybe.
Yeah, I feel like it might be a situation where like you can probably go with a similar approach to the previous, but I mean, we'll have to see how it looks on team preview because it really will just come down to, you know, do I feel like I can still win with the same comp, which I do feel like Juan was in a position where like maybe he makes one more like good call with the Ursaluna, you're able to get one more knockout, like you can just give yourself a lot of momentum. But without further ado, let's get into the game. Let's see how that goes. But I think for sure, like I would probably expect maybe something similar, but maybe there is a potential adjustment from both players. But we're going to see the Ursalunan and Incenso having a switch up from the opposing side, and we are going to see actually a switch up to Basket Legion and Sinistcha. So both players opting to adjust their approach. I think a little bit more favorable towards Juan's side, at least because you're able to throw out a wave crash. But you know, obviously, there's like a bunch of different ways this can go, especially on turn one with a Rillaboom switch in.
Yeah, the notable thing here is Junhyeok's Ursaluna Blood Moon is an Assault Vest. It's leftovers with that Terra Electric, so it is going to be able to terrestrialize out of that water move. But the same thing with Incineroar, actually, it being Terra Bug. Neither of them are going to resist. And honestly, the resist is what's more important when you're playing against these rain teams like Wands, because it allows you to take significantly less. Whereas if you're still taking neutral, all the modifiers from like the choice band on Basket Legion, as well as potential rain in the back, kind of add up and you're not able to really mitigate them in a strong enough way. Sinistra here swapping out for Juan is going to go into the Incineroar to lower the attack of that Incineroar on Junhyeok's side to maybe potentially live a knockoff or something of the sort, allow Basket Legion to return. We do see just a flip turn though into that Incineroar doing a little over 50% and swapping back out. So Juan repositioning both of his Pokemon here to better be poised against the Incineroar and the Ursaluna here, and kind of getting in a similar position that we saw from game one where you have the option of Fake Out Trick Room, and I think this was a strong turn from Juan, but we haven't even got to see what Junhyeok does yet, as it is that knockoff into the Sinistra. Super effective damage, removing that Citrus Berry, no more healing option for it, and a Yawn there into the Incineroar.
Yeah, I mean, the Yawn here obviously pretty nice. You're obviously setting yourself up for a decent turn where you're able to get, I mean, I obviously force a switch here, but Incineroar kind of wants to switch already with the parting shot. That being said, the Yawn was originally going into the Sinistcha slot, so it makes sense, right? Pivoting in the Incineroar was pretty good there. You're able to get some chip into the Incineroar. Now, the knockoff gain to Sinistcha is like a little bit difficult because it means your Sinistcha, obviously, its health is getting cut down a little bit. Realistically here, a parting shot into the opposing Incineroar slot is safe, but you have to be a little bit careful of the taunt coming out, and the taunt does stop the parting shot, which means now this Incineroar is going to be susceptible to that Yawn.
And it is going to be stuck on the field here, meaning it's going to have to fall asleep. Matcha Gotcha here into the Ursaluna Incineroar does a lot of damage to that Ursaluna, I think. Definitely more than what I was expecting. Able to heal up the Sinistra a good amount here from both the Ursaluna and Incineroar, almost nearly at full again. And Ursaluna going for a Blood Moon now into the Sinistra. Ooh, that's really low. Definitely within range of a Flare Blitz if Junhyeok had it.
Yeah, I think a big thing here too is that with the taunt coming out here, getting this Incineroar to go to sleep this turn is pretty good. Not to mention we did see that the Incineroar outspeeds the Sinistcha here, so if Sinistcha wants to stay on the board and go for another Matcha Gotcha, it is going to have to terrestrialize to stay alive, right? And that might not even be that worth it, but just opting to go for a regular Matcha Gotcha here. Ursaluna is going to switch out, so probably being a little bit concerned about taking too much chip here. We are going to see the opposing Volcarona come in here, which is going to be able to quad resist that Matcha Gotcha. Knockoff goes into Sinistcha. Pretty safe turn from Junhyeok, and, you know, obviously from Juan's side, trying to burn that sleep on Incineroar, but you are losing a really big resource to get up that Trick Room.
Yeah, and without Trick Room here, we saw how dominant it was game one, allowed Juan to almost get to a position to win, was kind of doesn't have it now and has to rely on the Basket Legion, which, I mean, you're standing in front of two fire types now. The other Ursaluna in the back isn't terrestrialized and chipped, and you just threatening so much damage here. You know, 3 of the Pokemon on Junhyeok's side do not want to take a wave crash or even a flip turn in this situation if you you feel like Basculegion still isn't primed and ready to go. This is a super safe turn, I think, from Juan to burn those turns on the Incineroar.
I do think it's a really safe opportunity to get Ursaluna in and burned, which is nice, right? Like, you do want to be able to get that Ursaluna in safely. I think the best outcome possible for Juan would be you get the turn 1 Wake on the Incineroar. You're able to land that parting shot into the Volcarona to cancel out his Quiver Dance. You're flip turning, knocking out the Incineroar, and you're going to be able to get in that burned Ursaluna. Those would all be a very good combination of factors that would allow to put a lot of pressure. But we're going to see flip turn comes out here, does knock out that Incineroar. So Terra Dragon on Volcarona being for naught on this turn. And we're going to see this Ursaluna come in and receive a free burn, which is pretty impactful here. The big question is, does Incineroar wake up?
And if Incineroar wakes up, that'll be absolutely huge. You do need to start stopping this Volcarona. The thing about Basculegion is normally it has that Swift Swim with the Pelipper. It doesn't wake up, though. Incineroar is going to take another turn of sleep. But as I was saying, the Pelipper not being on this team select for Juan means that the Basculegion is eventually going to be outsped by the Quiver Dance Volcarona. So that could be very scary if it does get out of hand. And with something like the Terra Dragon, you aren't able to go for those strong Terra Water Wave crashes. Last Respects, though, as your team does get knocked out, will be doing a lot of damage. But with Ninetales there as Junhyeok's 4th Pokemon revealed here, is going to start to be able to Encore lock you into specific things depending on what the Incineroar wants to go for.
Yeah, I think the big thing here is, again, does Incineroar wake up? It is worth noting, too, that there was a little bit of a, what's called a difference in like how the turn would have been sequenced the previous turn if there was a wake up, because it had to be knockoff because of the taunt just expiring this previous turn. But the Terra Blast coming out here, going into this Ursaluna, valuing the damage. The question is, can this Ursaluna take the double up? If it can, this Facade going into the Volcarona would be huge. It does end up hanging on. Now we're going to see Facade goes into this Volcarona, but Incineroar stays asleep, which is a pretty big deal here, right? You did want it to wake up so you can maybe get that chip into the Ninetales, but being able to trade Volcarona definitely could be worse. It does still leave Juan in the game.
I think, funny enough, the Incineroar being asleep here would help Juan out a lot, but the fact that the Ursaluna was able to live, that double up, matters a lot more, because now your Basculegion is in the back and there's nothing on Junhyeok's side to really threaten you anymore. No knockoff from the Incineroar. You know that you are going to be able to hit this Ursaluna, even if it does, even if it had Terastallization, which we know it doesn't because the Volcarona spent it, would not be able to take a lot of these hits. And Incineroar guaranteeing the wake up this turn is going to be able to go for big amounts of damage as the Icy Wind actually dodges the Incineroar. Maybe not the one you wanted to dodge. The Ursaluna here, you know, would be faster than the Incineroar, which maybe could have been big, but the Incineroar guarantee waking up here and moving before the Ursaluna is going to be super big as this Flare Blitz gets fired off into the Ninetales.
Yeah, well, Blitz coming out here is huge, right? Like, if Icy Wind had connected, you would have probably just gotten Earth Power and knocked out, but getting a burn and... I was gonna say, this position does not look particularly great for Juan, but the Icy Wind dodge into was it a critical hit on the Ninetales too, or was it just... I think it was a critical hit. I think it was a critical hit. I think it was a critical hit. Okay, so it was a Icy Wind dodge, critical hit, burn onto Ninetales to beat it. So now Basculegion can beat this Ursaluna in a 1v1. If none of those factors had happened, I think it would have probably been almost a guaranteed win for South Korea this week. So that's like a really interesting outcome of the turn, right? Because if Icy Wind connects on Incineroar, Earth Power goes first. Even if Icy Wind misses, if Flare Blitz doesn't crit and it burns, Ninetales will go down low, but it won't get knocked out. And if it doesn't get burned, then even if it gets crit, it's still fine. So all of those factors coming in to bring Juan back into the game and allowing it to go to a game 3. That was pretty crazy, because now obviously you can just throw a Wave Crash. There's no Terra available since Volcarona ate the Terra Dragon already, but that's an insane turn.
All I'm saying is Incineroar got the 3-turn sleep, so it all works out in the end. The Incineroar was just napping and powering itself up to, you know, finally fire off that Flare Blitz. If your Pokemon takes a 3-turn sleep, it's guaranteed to wake up, get that critical hit, and the burn.
Yeah, I'm getting like flashbacks almost, you know what I mean? Like seeing that, I'm like, like that's a crazy turn. I mean, like It's so funny too, because that's like one of the things, you know, like when you're like talking to your friends or whatever, it's like, yeah, I just played this crazy round. This guy just like he like dodged icy wind, critical hit, flare blitz, burn me, and they're like, okay, sure. They're like, you probably just messed up. And it's like that one we just actually saw. And I was like, yeah, no, like it was mostly like played pretty well. Like you can't really do much else about that situation, right? But just like all those combinations of factors at once into that like specific outcome was crazy, right? Like I mean, honestly, if you're playing, you know what I mean, from Junhyeok's side though, you're not feeling too bad about it, because realistically, like the plan worked out fine. Even with the adjustment that Juan made, you were still able to put yourself in a potentially winning position. Just got to focus up, right? Not get tilted, and just try and, you know, execute your plan consistently again. I feel like definitely in the matchup, it has felt like Junhyeok has been like ahead quite a bit in like a lot of the exchanges. I mean, Incineroar sleeping a lot was pretty useful for that too, but again, like that taunt and yawn turn was just huge.
Yeah, but let's jump into game 3 here and see how both of our players maybe want to adjust or, you know, stick to their game points and not get crit burned in this game 3. We are going to see the same lead from both players here. That Sinistcha and Basket Legion here on Juan's side, and the Incineroar and Ursaluna Blood Moon on Junhyeok's.
Yeah, so we're going to see maybe a little bit of different sequencing here, maybe acknowledging that you need to get that Trick Room up immediately. Otherwise, it's going to be a little bit of an awkward position, right? I think the Incineroar being able to switch in here for the Basket Legion is an interesting choice, because you could also just go for no risk flip turn. Like there is, I think, legitimately like zero downside to throwing flip turn into the Incineroar, considering the Basket Legion is faster. So maybe being afraid of like getting called out on a specific Pokemon, maybe like Terror or something. But we are just going to see a very safe switch here into the Incineroar, maybe missing an opportunity to get some chip here. And we're going to see the Sinistcha just try to get this Trick Room up.
Yeah, I was really surprised to see no flip turn there. You lose nothing from getting damage. You actually gain more if you force a terrestrialization. But I mean, guessing avoiding just any possible damage. Yawn though into the Sinistcha. No taunt from the Incineroar means that the Sinistcha on Juan's side is going to be able to get up that Trick Room, which we saw in game 1, allowed him to gain a lot of ground. Now, being slower than both of these Pokemon, Machagacha is going to do a lot of damage to this Ursaluna, and with Fake Out here on Juan's side active, you're going to be able to fire it off into one of these slots and prevent a Pokemon from moving this turn. Junhyeok does have the option to pivot out into something like that Volcarona that we saw before, but no Fake Out. Blood Moon actually showing it slower than Juan's Sinistcha, able to do a lot of damage, breaking that Citrus Berry there on Juan Sinistcha, and this is going to be a very interesting turn now as the Machagacha fires off and is going to be able to heal a little bit.
I feel like the thing is it was like a very like reasonable thing to Blood Moon the Sinistcha. I actually think Juan keeping the Sinistcha in was pretty smart, because it, like, when something gets yawned, like, you're almost always making a play anticipating for it to switch, right? It is worth noting that the we kind of saw the interaction before, the opposing Incineroar moving first outside of Trick Room with the taunt, so it makes sense that the parting shot is safe here. That being said, it's not 100% safe, because if knockout from the opposing Incineroar is going into this Incineroar slot, it's going to knock out that Flame Orb, and your Ursaluna is going to lose a ton of momentum, right? So it's a very safe cover play to make. Blood Moon into one slot, knock off into the other slot. Is it going to be coming out? Nope. We're going to see a parting shot. It's going to be going into that Sinistcha, hard committing the Ursaluna coming into the slot. You can cycle Intimidate back in, but you are allowing Ursaluna to get in with the burn.
Yeah, I think there, if you Blood Moon into the Sinistcha slot, you're kind of playing around the fact that Ursaluna is coming into that slot. I still actually think keeping the Incineroar in and going for that knockoff into that Sinistcha slot and committing to it, like you said, is probably your best bet, because Parting Shot is cool and all, but you're not removing the Flame Orb from the Ursaluna, which we know gives it a lot of its power in that facade. But it getting a -1 doesn't really stop it. It can always swap back out, and especially with things like the Sinistcha and the Incineroar still being in play for Juan, it definitely is possible. But Sinistcha is going to fall asleep here and not going to be able to move next turn at the least. But Rillaboom there being Junhyeok's adjustment for this game is super, super smart. You're setting the grassy terrain for the Sinistcha, but you are able to threaten Fake Out and super effective damage into this Ursaluna, forcing a terrestrialization potentially.
I sense a facade in Junhyeok's future on one of his Pokemon. I just think that realistically, like, The knockoff too, like even like it could have potentially gone into the Incineroar just to cover for the parting shot, right? Like if you go for a Blood Moon into Sinistcha, so if Ursaluna comes in, it takes chip and it doesn't get in for free, and then knockoff into Incin, so if Ursaluna comes in on the other slot, you get the like Flame Orb knocked off. That could have been really good, but obviously it's not what happened. But now just being able to really safely just go for a Terra Ghost Facade, you're going to be almost guaranteed damage here. We're actually going to see no switching at all, so not opting to switch Incineroar back in. I don't know. Maybe this Rillaboom has been, you know, on a crazy training regimen, but I don't exactly expect it to take this Facade all that well.
I don't think it's going to eat the Facade at all. Earth Power, though, being the move choice into the Sinistcha, maybe expecting Incineroar to come in. Facade, though, into the Rillaboom is going to do just enough to knock it out, and that's going to be a huge piece removed for Junhyeok. And what I was expecting that turn maybe was something like a Grassy Glide and a Blood Moon, because we knew you know, that Grassy Glide is priority, you're able to get a little bit of damage, and then you can play around with that maybe. But no Incineroar swap and no Grassy Glide is very interesting there. I'm curious to maybe see how Junhyeok was thinking that turn would play out.
And even then, Blood Moon was used up, right? So you couldn't even like lock into it a second time, so you'd have to Earth Power. But I just feel like there was probably like what I think Junhyeok was trying to call out was a lot of times, like if the Ursaluna player like knows you're making a lot of defensive switches, like the instant switch was fairly obvious, right? So maybe like indexing on Juan overreading by going for a headlong into the Rillaboom, right? So trying to catch that, but just unfortunately there, like it doesn't pay off. Facade just goes straight into the Rillaboom. Now we get Incineroar in, but in a much less ideal situation. Not to mention, if the Sinistcha wakes up, right, gets a Machagacha off on the Ursaluna, it's going to be very, very difficult to come back from.
Yeah, the fact that neither of these Pokemon are able to be faked out here on Juan's side, meaning this Incineroar is really only here to get the -1 drop on Juan's Ursaluna. And while that does matter a little bit, super effective damage into this Incineroar with a Headlong Rush or a Facade into it, predicting a Terrestrialization here on the Incineroar, speaking of into that Terra Ghost, is going to be very meaningful. So Terra Ghost there, allowing you to actually be immune to the Facade, is going to be super impactful if that is what Juan locked into. Sinistcha actually wakes up though and goes for a Rage Powder, redirecting any attack that this Blood Moon wants to throw off. Maybe playing around crit Blood Moon, but even then I don't think gets there. Sinistcha eats that for breakfast though, and a Facade.
Oh, Facade. Yeah, Facade going into the Incineroar there is huge. I think could have gone for a very low risk Headlong Rush there. I mean, you do lower your defenses, so you're taking more from knockoff, but it would have been really nice chip to be getting into that Incineroar slot. Now we're going to finally get to see what the reveal of the last Pokemon is on Junhyeok's side. I think a big thing here will be, is it something that can actually swing the momentum back into his favor? And it is going to be that Volcarona, which is one of the better Pokemon you could be having against this board right now. You have access to a couple of defensive plays. You have the access to switch Ursaluna and Heat Wave or Quiver Dance, Protect, right? Like there's so many different branching options that can go favorably. The main thing that you really have to be careful about here is how do you deal with the Basculegion in the back?
That's exactly what I was about to say. Two Pokemon here are going to be weak to the Wave Crash from that Basculegion in the back. Would have been 3 if the Incineroar didn't Terrestrialize out, but that's kind of the problem with these Pokemon that Junhyeok has been bringing, and especially bringing in the Rillaboom and sacrificing it as well, is that you have no real super effective damage in this Basculegion, nor real way of beating it outside of your Quiver Dance, Terra Dragon, Volcarona. So the fact that you had to burn on the Incineroar to get a little bit of damage reduction with that parting shot means you're really going to have to play from behind here and reposition yourself to a spot where maybe you're able to get around this Ursaluna. And this is a way to start. That's going to put the Ursaluna at -3. It swaps out though to remove those boosts, and Incineroar comes back in to reset its own fake out into something like the Volcarona. But as you said before, Joe, if this is a Quiver Dance on the Volcarona, we could see Junhyeok maybe start to get back in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think something really important to note there that's particularly interesting is we saw the Ursaluna switch before the Ursaluna on Juan Gonzalez's side. Now, of course, you know, Pokemon are trained differently, but that could imply that the, of course, like, I mean, I guess we already saw it, but the Ursaluna is slower than Juan's Ursaluna. So if it ends up being an Ursaluna versus Ursaluna endgame, Juan's Ursaluna can have an advantage here, right? So it's really just about removing this Volcarona, the Volcarona being the main obstacle to Juan being able to win with his Ursaluna against the opposing Ursaluna. It is also worth noting here that because the switch happened after, it now means that this Incineroar is in front of a Terraghost Incineroar and Volcarona without an Intimidate drop, which is really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is you have to be careful about the Sinistcha getting up another Trick Room, though. So you are kind of forced to avoid going a Fake Out. You have to taunt the Sinistcha this turn to make sure that Trick Room doesn't go up. So this Incineroar here on Juan's side is going to be able to go for an attack this turn, as Junhyeok's Incineroar, as I said before, has to go for that taunt to make sure Sinistcha can't set up Trick Room and remove all the benefits of your Quiver Dances of the Volcarona. That Flare Blitz does so much damage, though, into that Volcarona, over 50%. Trick Room gets denied there on Juan's side, but with this Volcarona being at +2 now, it's going to have to start firing off attacks based on how much that Flare Blitz did on Juan's side. You don't really have any more time to kind of wait around and set up more Quiver Dances. You have to start attacking, and even then, I don't know how you get over Juan's Incineroar.
I think a big part of it here is that, like, by going for the Flare Blitz, it's really nice for keeping the Volcarona slot honest, right? Like, even if it gets a setup with another Quiver Dance, right, you're still gonna be able to do enough chip. They don't have Giga Drain, right? So you're going to be able to just go for another Flare Blitz into that slot, put on pressure, right? Not to mention the taunt play obviously is nice for being able to stop the Sinistcha from getting up Trick Room, but realistically, there is still a huge advantage here on Juan's side, right? All you need to do is chip this Volcarona a little bit more, and it's gonna be in range of a Basket Legion Aqua Jet for the remainder of the game, right? So as soon as that's able to be done, then you can use your Ursaluna to deal with the other two if you position it properly, right? The main thing here is just going to be, how do you navigate with the Sinistcha? Are you going to let it go down? Yes, you're going to be taking that chip on the instant, but I think it's going to be well worth it.
Yeah, Junhyeok's best play here is to go for a parting shot on this Incineroar to bring the Incineroar down a stage of attack and maybe hopefully live the turn on Volcarona. But as you said, we know Basket Legion is the Pokemon in the back for Juan. We saw it on lead. Being able to come in and threaten that Aqua Jet on the Volcarona is going to be super detrimental. Of course, there is a bit of a guessing game, I guess you could say, where Protect Blood Moon could come out. But even then, I'm not sure if that KOs. Flare Blitz, though, isn't able to KO the Volcarona. That -1 paying dividends there for Junhyeok. The Ursaluna is going to get a little bit of healing there from the leftovers as well, and is almost full HP. You do have to decide what you want to bring in here, though, if you're one, and it is going to be the Ursaluna. And I actually think this is super interesting because you're assuming now that you are able to eat the +2 Heat Wave, which if you do on Ursaluna, as they're really bulky, you know that you're faster than Junhyeok's Ursaluna. So you're hoping that Facade is able to get the KO. That's also not stopping
Headlong.
Yeah, exactly, and Headlong as well. You could also just protect the Volcarona and swap back Incineroar, right? And you could go for a Fake Out on the next turn. But this is a really interesting position now.
I think it might even be a slight misplay here, because you're allowing your Ursaluna, which is a really important key piece, to remove the remaining options, and you're just leaving it open to this Volcarona, which doesn't have to be a threat, right? You could have brought Basket Legion in, you could have gone for that Aqua Jet into the Volcarona and gone for a parting shot in the Ursaluna. It's very, very safe here. We are going to see the switch back into the Incineroar, which does make sense, and Headlong does call that out properly, but you are leaving yourself susceptible to such a strong attack from this Volcarona. It's incredibly risky, and it could put you in such a bad position here. We're gonna see Protect comes out from the Volcarona, playing it safe, doesn't necessarily want to have to guess whether the Ursaluna protects or not, but still, it's not exactly ideal. Now there's Fake Out available from Junhyeok's side, and on top of that too, you're kind of forced to protect Ursa, but it's also minus in its defenses now, so it's even worse into the Volcarona. I feel like definitely, like, the sequencing leaves a lot to be desired for Juan's position. It's not irrecoverable, but it's definitely not ideal.
Yeah, but the problem now is, yeah, as you said, it's -1. Before, if it didn't go for a Headlong Rush, I think, you know, you would have been fine. You would have been able to eat it. But with the burn basically being, you know, +2, -1 on the Ursaluna, this Heat Wave is going to do so much damage. And with Fake Out, you're guaranteed to live the turn as long as you knock out Ursaluna. And that can be very, very dangerous. Terra Blast being the move of choice, though, in Incineroar to guarantee the knockout. Maybe this Incineroar Junhyeok side is going for a knockoff, to maybe hoping it knocks out. Being super effective and -1. This is going to be super big if it gets a knockout. It does. That's going to be huge for Junhyeok, because now the Volcarona is fast in the Basket Legion. If it locks in an Aqua Jet, that's fine. That means the Ursaluna gets to live in the back. So if you're Junhyeok here, you're 3-1, and while everything is low HP except the Ursaluna, this game is all but over.
Yeah, if I'm Junhyeok, I'm like, honestly, like I probably would have been in like very like scared of like the position like early on, right? But the choice to bring the Ursaluna and just not it in this position, right? Like now being forced to lock into Aqua Jet, sure, you're gonna get the knockout on this Incineroar, right? But Volcarona is just gonna be able to get chip here, and since you're locked into Aqua Jet, now Ursaluna is just gonna be able to sit in front of it and not really care that much, right? I definitely think that it was really well played, but maybe the pressure of just like so many options, right? Like definitely getting to Juan in that moment, not necessarily identifying that Aqua Jet from the Basket Legion was the correct route to go, especially since it would allow you to switch your moves for later. And now being forced to Aqua Jet here, you can throw it into the Ursaluna, making a call that Volcarona is going to protect. But realistically, at this point, there's a lot of incentive from Junhyeok to just double attack.
You always just have the double attack here. Like we said before, the Basket Legion can either lock an Aqua Jet or the Wave Crash. And either way, it is going to have to take this Heat Wave from the Volcarona. And that is going to be a 2-1 victory for Junhyeok Yang.
Yeah, wow. I mean, yeah, I'm very interested in the Ursaluna switching. I mean, we kind of already talked about it, right? Obviously, there's a lot of pressure around these matches. Sometimes, you know, of course, maybe there's like a certain like play you're hyper fixating on or like thinking about, but it did feel like it was very safe for Juan to be able to bring in the Basket Legion there, right? You bring in the Basket Legion, you're able to go for that Aqua Jet into the Volcarona, you're able to parting shot that Ursaluna safely, bring in that Ursaluna on your side, and you're able to pressure into the slot. So maybe Juan being worried about a particular option that Junhyeok was not going for, but Junhyeok playing excellently. I felt like all three games were played really well. I mean, of course, in game 2, right, Junhyeok ended up getting the crit Flare Blitz burn plus Icy Wind miss, whatever, but being able to recover well from that, I think, was a really good showcase of how well they were playing. And yeah, I think it was just a really interesting end game. It definitely could have gone a lot differently had the Basket Legion chosen to come in, but with that Ursaluna coming in, leaving Volcarona in with a lot of pressure was allowing it to get a ton of damage for sure.
But that was definitely a great game, Joe. That's going to be it from us here at the desk at World Cup. We're going to cut to a quick break real quick, so don't go anywhere.